excuse do I have not to appreciate all the blessings I've been given just by being born in a high standard of living free country, and not try again? So it's fortunately, I was raised by a very optimistic father who always believed there was light at the end of the tunnel. So that's ground into my DNA that if there's a barn filled with defecation, somehow there must be a pony in there somewhere.
I love that.
So what is necessary to do is to reach out for help when you're in that situation. And if it happens to be an addiction, the key is to know that there are 12-step programs with unique fellowships that are there to help. And you cannot do this alone. But resilience in all of its forms is what's necessary to deal with life. And when you're knocked back, when you're despondent and destabilized and depressed, there has to be some spark of hope. And hope, better tomorrow, will get you there. So it's, I have a phrase which is called stay in process, which is concentrate on those steps designed to create the result without obsessing on the result. In other words, so if you're an addict, stay in the process of working those steps, going to meetings, keeping going. Don't worry about what's going to happen 2 years from now. If you're a football player and you're trying to make a squad, do those things in practice and in games that are designed to do best. Don't sit and count the roster numbers and figure out that, oh my God, I'm not going to make this. Stay in process.
So really, when you're looking at resilience, it's not, as you said, not the focus on the result itself. It's almost a resilience muscle that you're building as you go through the process.
Yes. It's and to find the right path that will lead to the best results. In other words, obsessing about whether or not you're going to make this sale, whether or not you're going to ever get a job back. Work on your resume, work on networking, work on the steps that'll make it more likely that you find another job. If you are overwhelmed by the totality of things that you need to accomplish and feel overwhelmed, then do this. Make a list of all those tasks that you need to accomplish and prioritize them. Take the first one first, accomplish that, then go on to the second and accomplish that. Don't look at the overwhelming totality of the situation because it creates panic.
Correct. Oh, that is brilliant, because I think a lot of people take it on as this big mountain instead of putting it together, like you said, at a list and start executing on that list, taking care of doing those items. And then as they're getting done, you actually give yourself a chance to see that hope that you're talking about, that spark of hope that you need, that there is an opportunity here because you're working on the list.
And I think it's important in life to always clarify what your goals are and to do an internal inventory. So let's take concepts like short-term financial gain, money you can get quickly, long-term economic security, money over time, family concepts and how you value that, spiritual concepts and how you value that, geographical location, the weather, the lifestyle, being close to your parents, urban, rural, autonomy, the ability to work without being dominated and hovered over, making a difference in the world, for a football player, it's being on a winning team, the quality of coaching, being in a system that's right, the facility. For someone else, it might be the corner office or vacation or something else. But you need to have the most clarity about what your internal goals are and what will fulfill you as a person. Not what the public or your friends think is right, but look in your own heart and figure out what it is that truly will motivate you. And you need to do it at different times throughout life, because what your goals and priorities and values, your values should stay the same, but what your goals and priorities are will be different at 20 years of age than they are at 40.
Exactly. So how often do you recommend that happening? Especially because I'm thinking as you're rebuilding your life or your business, there comes a time when those goals change. There also comes a time when the old you may come into play. What is it that you do to handle that and to also stay focused on those newer goals, or to make sure you're focusing and thinking about what those newer goals are?
So first of all, if you'll do the internal inventory, it will allow you to see the setback not as catastrophe, but as an opportunity to be more in touch with what is critically important to you at this time, right now, as opposed to as an opportunity to perhaps move in a different direction. As an opportunity, it may be that you spent your life governed by a drive for money, money, money. And at a certain point, you realize, you know what? I have enough money. I want to make a difference in the world in a positive way. Well, I have enough money, but my family relationships are not what they could be. I need to spend more time. My dad had two core values he raised us with. One was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was try to make a meaningful difference in the world, cure pain, offer hope to people, and use your energy. At the end of life, you can come to the perspective that that's all that's enduring, that ephemeral fame and newspaper clippings and bank book and all that will fade, but what you're left with are the quality of the relationships that you have. Were you a good son? Were you a good brother? Were you a good uncle? Were you a good husband? Were you, did you help people when it cost you something to help them? Were you there for people in critical times when they were vulnerable and needed help? And then what have you given back to the world that, has some value in making life better for other people?
Those are critical questions, and I hope everybody's taking note of that, because to me, those are questions that any of us operating, not sports related at all, at any time where you're reinventing your life or reevaluating exactly what your goals are, because they do change. I mean, I know when I became a mama, my goals changed dramatically compared to beforehand, before I was even looking at a family. So for somebody who might be in the middle of this rebuild right now, Leigh, let's say even as we were talking about with the Mavericks, talking about a rebuild and a reinvention, what's one thing that they need to focus on right now? Is it the list first? Is it focusing on your goals first? What will be the thing that gives them the most hope, or at least an anchor to get that process started?
Creating a culture that's based around peak performance and winning, because you will see that in sports, in the NFL last year, there were 3 coaches that came in, changed the culture of a team. Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos, Dan Quinn with the Washington Commanders, Jim Harbaugh with the Los Angeles Chargers. They essentially had the same players, except Washington got a brilliant new quarterback, but they essentially had the same players. But all of a sudden, the results were much different because they created a culture that got peak performance and complete unity out of the group. So the whole was bigger than the sum of the parts. And they were all operating on the same cylinder. And so, it's creating a culture that inspires people. Now, that's true in the workplace. So that can you create in this office a energy and feeling that we're making a positive difference in the world and your work matters, and therefore get people who are super motivated and believe that not only are they flourishing economically, but they're also doing good things for the world.
Absolutely. That culture is so critical in building and growing businesses, as you said, and even with families. So as somebody, let's say they're reinventing themselves, which maybe it's not the heat that you see in sports where they're under scrutiny by the public eye or the media, but they're still under scrutiny by their 2-year-old child who's watching, and this is their own childhood history. Is there any recommendations you have for somebody who's trying to build that culture, not just in a business, but also within a family?
I think you want to step back and take a look at what your own individual skill set is, so that you want to be brutally honest with you about what your skill set is. So I can't fix a car. My singing voice would break glass. I can't do a piece of art. You have to be realistic of what your actual ability to contribute in the world is. But there are a few other things I can do reasonably well. And so it's having a realistic sense of that. When it comes to children, it's, can you put yourself into their heart and mind and see the world the way they see it, and not simply focus on your own feelings about what they ought to be or what they could be or what the ideal thing is, but to actually deal with the real person. And as a parent, your role is to give security and unquestioned love and support. So your child knows there's always a safe place to go to with their parent, and where somehow you'll work through problems, but everything will be okay. And you have to try to have an understanding of what each person's capable of doing, and then, again, have them fulfill their dreams.
So you think that's beautifully said, and that gives that a nice structure that sometimes people feel like that they don't have. We'll go into parenthood without a actual instruction manual at all, and then all of a sudden when you're hit with a setback like that, sometimes even more than the public eye, the eye of those critical and who matter most to us are the ones who make the big difference.
And I think it's really important in parent to realize you are the parent. The child is the child. In other words, you have to be willing to put up with the growth process of that child, which is not always exciting or fun, but you've got to be the source of security and stability, and you have to be ready to be leaned on. It's not about my needs, it's about the actual needs of my children.
Exactly. And, as families, there are different, even different life cycles of different families. I happen to be in a family where cycling now to the age where they're aging, and there is now even dementia on the horizon. And I know you have taken great care and had a very great legacy and passion towards brain care and brain health. So as a family deals with that, I want to talk a little bit more about the fact that you have dealt with athletes who have to deal with this, and then they have to deal with family members who now see that there is a need for brain care and brain need. And you've been really there, the champion for this, Leigh. So I'd love to hear from you some of the stories or even advice you have for families dealing with this, people who individually have to deal with the fact that they are seeing that side of reinvention, including their brain health now?
So, the first thing I would say that it's a inevitable part of the circle of life that at a certain point, the child starts to become the parent as the parent ages, and the parent becomes the child. And it's uncomfortable dealing with parents that may be having dementia or physical problems because you might be used to that person being a source of security, a rock, and it's destabilizing. But it's just the way that life goes. There was very little understood about the brain 20 years ago. And I had a crisis of conscience because I'm representing half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And they kept getting hit in the head. And we would go to doctors and ask, how many is too many? When should you start to contemplate the long-term consequences? And they had no answers. So I started holding concussion conferences. The first one was in 1994. And Troy Aikman and Steve Young and Warren Moon and Drew Bledsoe and Rob Johnson all came, and we had neurologists from across the country. And again, the field was just evolving. Well, by 2006, we kept holding these conferences, and then we had neurologists telling us that they thought 3 or more was the magic number. And after that, there was an exponentially higher risk of Alzheimer's, premature senility, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, Parkinson's, and depression. So I called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. And the problem was that it was seen as an inevitability that once there was traumatic brain injury or an elderly person got dementia or something else, it was just inevitably a slippery slope. It just got worse and worse. We've discovered a couple treatments that can actually rehabilitate a concussed brain. One is called RTMS, and it's magnets against the brain. And the other is neurofeedback. And the concept is neuroplasticity. And it means the ability of the brain using these modalities to rewire with new synapses and new connections that can spark better memory, faster processing, and stave off the bad parts of it. So the problem that you have in both the cases of elderly people and the case of athletes is denial. They won't recognize they have a problem. And athletes are acculturated and grow up in a way where they don't accept the norms of physical health that the rest of the society does. So if the rest of the society believes that long-term health is the key, and much lower priority the ability to play a professional career, and much less than that the ability to play in any given season, and less than that the ability to play in any given game. And the least important priority would be this play, playing this play. The athlete turns it on its head, and this play becomes everything. And they look at you like you don't understand. And in the same way, the elderly person with dementia doesn't feel it happening and is resistant and in denial and defensive. So the point is, first you have to break that cycle, which is different. And the best allies they have with an athlete are parents and other folk. But the truth of it is, we set up a concussion foundation to try and raise money for research and to try to find more healing, and then also to serve at-risk communities that don't get brain health. So they could be the homeless, they could be firefighters who've just been through this huge trauma, and try to get them treatment. We have a doctors board, which currently has 13 doctors. We have an athlete board that has players like Warren Moon and Earl Campbell and Bruce Smith and Nick Lowry and Brett Favre and a whole series of players. And we're just getting going in terms of trying to make a difference. But hopefully we'll raise more awareness about the dangers and the hope. I've put together a set of healing modalities, hyperbaric oxygen, stem cell, red light, Bimini, which is hoses in the bathtub, is oxygenated in the same way that hyperbaric puts oxygen into your system, NanoV, neurofeedback, and these can help all of us in anti-aging, but they also can be of great use to sports teams, both to stimulate energy and productivity in critical moments in a contest. Most games are coming down in football last season to the fourth quarter, the last drive, or the last play. So I'm going to take these to pro and collegiate teams. The second thing they do is heal injury much quicker. But at the same time, the athletes are taking advantage of this, which is a revolution in biomed. All of us over the age of 30 can use these healing properties because they're all anti-inflammatory, and they can extend productive lifespan longer.
See, and that's exciting that you've already listed out the modalities. Do you have those listed anywhere else, Leigh, that I might be able to direct people to take a look at?
Well, we'll get it from McKenna.
Okay, we'll definitely do that. And then if there's a place on the site, especially your foundation site, I'd love to direct people there too, especially if they have the interest, as you were saying, with the different modalities from the red light to the magnets to the neurofeedback. You had such a helpful list.
There's an Israeli study that shows that by doing 40 hyperbaric oxygen sessions, it extends the telomeres, which are the internal building blocks that predict lifespan and the rest of it, by 20%. And if you do 60, by 25%. So in my view, that could equate to like 8 to 10 more years in terms of sentient, productive life.
Sure. I'll have to make sure that we look at that too and include the definition of telomeres, because that's so important in that building block. So I know we're getting close to time, but I did want to ask you one last question, because you do work with high-performing athletes. And we do see the fact that after there's been a brain trauma, you mentioned that denial was one of the first things that happened across the board from even people who are dealing with brain injury as a whole, or an athlete who's doing that. Are there any patterns that you see that happen for those who mentally and physically make it back that you see happen right away, or that you like to make sure that they're educated and know that they need to work on this right away?
So first of all, we have some things that can be done prophylactically to protect the brain. The second thing is there needs to be an accounting of how many traumatic brain injuries someone has. One of the problems in a sport like football is that every time a lineman hits a lineman at the line of scrimmage at the inception of a play, it produces a low-level subconcussive brain event, a little bit of change. So you could have an offensive lineman who had 10,000 subconcussive events none of which were diagnosed, none of which he's aware of. He just feels stunned. But they might aggregate up to brain damage. So it's being aware of the situation. And then the people that take treatment seriously, who do the biofeedback, who do, there's a new group called IQ Mind treating athletes. Dr. Amen's done a lot of work like that. Christian Wohlmeyer's done a fair amount of work. So the aware former athlete takes steps to do a brain spec to see how damaged their brain is, and then go to treatment, do supplements, do some of RTMS, do neurofeedback, and get treated.
Beautiful. All right, Leigh, you have been so wonderful and so gracious. I feel like anytime I have the ability to listen to you, and that's what I was really hoping to do with the questions, is to make sure that I hear your expertise, and I really feel like you shared that today. Thank you so much, Leigh, again. Please say thank you to McKenna, and I'll follow up with her, okay?
Thank you for your help.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great weekend.